An expectant homeless mother asked for day-old bread, but the millionaire next to her fell in love with her. Secrets came to light, and their lives changed forever. A story of love and overcoming that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment where you are watching from. The relentless March rain fell on the streets of New York, transforming Fifth Avenue into a river of dirty water carrying debris and lost dreams. The heavy drops pounded against the fogged glass of the bread shop with the persistence of someone who has no hurry to leave. The familiar smell of fresh bread mixed with the damp odor of wet asphalt, creating an atmosphere that oscillated between warmth and melancholy. Sarah Johnson, 24 years old, stopped in front of the glass door of the bakery, hesitating for a moment that felt like an eternity. Her navy blue cleaning uniform, already faded from countless washes, was soaked and clung to her 7-month pregnant body. Her brown hair, usually tied back in a disciplined ponytail, now dripped water down her thin face, mingling with the tears she refused to shed. Her hands, rough from hard work and cleaning their products, trembled slightly as she held the handle of the plastic bag carrying her few belongings. Inside the bakery, the morning rush was in full swing. Hurrying executives ordered espresso to go. College students fought over the last warm chocolate croissants, and retirees took advantage of the rainy weather for a prolonged chat, accompanied by lattes and toasted bread. The contrast between the human warmth inside and the grey cold outside was striking. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to gather courage. Her prominent belly moved gently. The baby was restless, as if sensing her tension. She thought of Lily, her 3-year-old daughter, who was at the homeless shelter 2 blocks away, probably asking when Mommy would return with breakfast. The little girl had woken up crying from hunger, and the bread Sarah had saved from the previous day was moldy due to the humidity of the small room they shared with 5 other families. "How long are you going to stand there, girl?" The harsh voice of Mrs. Thompson, the bakery owner, cut through the air. The 60-year-old woman, with grey hair tied back in a bun, watched Sarah through the glass with an expression that mixed impatience and curiosity. Sarah pushed the door, making the bell ring to announce the arrival of customers. The warmth of the environment enveloped her immediately, along with the irresistible aroma of freshly baked French bread and brewed coffee. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel human again, far from the cruel reality of the wet streets. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice hoarse from working all night. I wanted to know if you have any bread from yesterday, for my daughter." The words tumbled out, laden with a shame she struggled to hide. Mrs. Thompson assessed her from head to toe, noting the wet uniform, the large belly, the deep dark circles under her eyes. "Day-old bread? Girl, don't you have money for a fresh loaf?" "I do," Sarah lied, feeling her cheeks burn. "It's just that she likes the softer bread. You know how kids are." Her voice faltered at the end, and she lowered her eyes, unable to meet the woman's penetrating gaze. A few meters away, leaning against the coffee counter, Raphael Johnson watched the scene with growing attention. At 32, he was used to receiving admiring glances wherever he went. Tall, about 6 feet tall, with slicked back, black hair and deep brown eyes that reflected a sharp intelligence. That morning, he wore an impeccably tailored navy blue suit, an Italian silk tie, and genuine leather dress shoes that probably cost more than Sarah earned in 3 months. Raphael had stopped by the bakery by chance, escaping the rain before an important meeting at his office 2 blocks away. As the heir and CEO of the Johnson restaurant chain, he was accustomed to the frantic pace of business, but something about the posture of the young pregnant woman made him pause his morning routine. "Listen here, girl," Mrs. Thompson continued, her tone oscillating between harshness and compassion. "I do have some yesterday's bread, but I can't just keep giving away food like that. This is a business, not a charity." Sarah felt the ground slip beneath her feet. The humiliation was like a stone in her chest, heavy and suffocating. "I understand, ma'am. Sorry to bother you." She began to turn towards the door, but Raphael's voice stopped her. "Excuse me," he said, approaching the counter with firm steps. "Mrs. Thompson, I'll take 10 French loaves, those chocolate croissants from the display, and 2 cups of lattes." His voice was deep, polite, but carried the natural authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Of course, Mr. Johnson. Always a pleasure to serve you," Mrs. Thompson smiled, instantly transforming. It was clear she knew the man and his influence in the neighborhood. Raphael turned to Sarah, who had stopped near the door, watching the transaction with wide eyes. "Miss, please accept some of these loaves, for your daughter." He extended his hand toward her, holding a paper bag already filled with the warm treats. "No, thank you," Sarah replied quickly, raising her hands in a defensive gesture. "I don't need charity." Her voice trembled, but there was an unwavering firmness in her words. "I just wanted to buy day-old bread." "It's not charity," Raphael insisted, taking a step toward her. "It's just solidarity among people who share the same space in this crazy city." He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his face and revealed a subtle dimple in his chin. Sarah studied him for a moment, trying to decipher his intentions. There was something in her eyes. It seemed sincere, but her life experience had taught her to be wary of seemingly generous gestures, especially from well-dressed men. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." "Sometimes we don't need elaborate reasons to help someone," he replied, keeping his voice calm and his gaze fixed on her eyes. "I see a mother worried about her daughter. That's enough for me." Silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the sound of rain outside and the muffled conversations of other customers. Sarah felt the baby move in her belly, as if it too were waiting for her decision. Mrs. Thompson observed the scene with growing interest, already imagining the stories she would tell her friends at the market. "I don't accept charity," Sarah repeated, but her voice had lost some of its initial hardness. "If you really want to help me, give me the chance to pay you back. I can clean your house, do your laundry, anything." David was impressed by the dignity she maintained, even in such a vulnerable situation. There was something about her that touched him deeply, an inner strength that contrasted with the apparent fragility of her situation. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she replied after hesitating for a moment. "Sarah, I'm David. And you're right, you don't need charity. But consider this alone then. When you can, you pay me back." He extended the bag of bread again, this time with a more careful gesture. Sarah looked at the bag, then at his face, trying to find any sign of insincerity or hidden motives. All she saw was a sincere and patient expression. The aroma of fresh bread reached her, making her stomach rumble loudly enough to be heard. "All right," she finally whispered, taking the bag with trembling hands. "But it really is a loan. I will pay back every cent." "Agreed," David smiled again. "And Sarah, your daughter is lucky to have a mother like you." The tears she had held back all morning finally escaped, rolling silently down her wet cheeks. Without saying anything more, she turned and left the bread shop, disappearing into the curtain of rain that continued to fall relentlessly over New York. David stood still, watching her walk away through the fogged window, unaware that this chance encounter would forever change the course of their lives. 3 weeks had passed since the meeting at the bread shop, and David Johnson had developed a habit he considered peculiar. Every morning around 7 o'clock he made a point of passing by the bread shop. Not that he needed the coffee. His office on Fifth Avenue had a state-of-the-art Italian machine that made espresso better than most establishments in the city. But something pulled him to that busy corner, where the smell of fresh bread mingled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the constant noise of morning traffic. Sitting at one of the small tables near the window, David pretended to read the New York Times, while his eyes discreetly searched for a familiar figure. Sarah had become a constant in his thoughts, and he found himself wondering if she was okay, if she had found a better job, if the baby was growing healthy. It was a concern that surprised him. After all, he barely knew her. "Mr. David, the usual morning coffee?" Mrs. Thompson approached the table, carrying a tray with a white porcelain cup and a plate with 2 still warm pastries. "Please, Mrs. Thompson," he replied, folding the newspaper. "By the way, that pregnant girl, Sarah, has she been around?" The older woman smiled mischievously, revealing slightly coffee-stained teeth. "Ah, so you're interested in the girl. I knew there was something different in the way you looked at her that day." "That's not it," David protested, feeling his face heat up. "It's just human concern. She seemed to be going through tough times." Of course, Mrs. Thompson chuckled softly. "Well, just so you know, she comes here every morning, promptly at 6:45, always buys 2 French breads and a cup of warm latte to take away. Never asks for a discount, never complains about the price. She's a girl of character, that Sarah." David discreetly glanced at his wristwatch, a Rolex Submariner he had received from his father on his 25th birthday. It was 7:15. He had missed Sarah by just 30 minutes. "Does she work nearby?" "From what I understand, she's a night cleaner in one of those commercial buildings on 5th Avenue. She must come straight from work and stop by here before heading home." Mrs. Thompson lowered her voice, adopting the conspiratorial tone of someone who enjoys sharing gossip. "The girl has a little daughter, you know. A beautiful child with curly hair just like her mother. Sometimes she brings the child when she has no one to leave her with." David absorbed this information like a detective piecing together a puzzle. The image of Sarah carrying a small child while balancing the weight of her own pregnancy deeply moved him. "Where does she live?" "I don't know that," Mrs. Thompson replied, wiping down the table next to them with a damp cloth. "But by the way she dresses and the hurry she always seems to be in, I imagine it's far from here. She probably takes the bus or subway." At that moment, the door of the bread shop opened with the familiar sound of the bell, and David felt his heart race. But it was just a middle-aged man looking for cigarettes and black coffee. Frustration and relief mixed in his chest. Frustration for having missed Sarah again. Relief because he still didn't quite know what he would say if he found her. In the office of Johnson Restaurants, located on the 10th floor of a modern glass and steel building, David tried to concentrate on the monthly meeting with the managers of his 5 units scattered throughout the city. The conference room had a panoramic view of downtown. From New York, he could see the bakery where he had had coffee that morning, a tiny spot in the urban landscape. "Mr. Johnson," the voice of Carla Smith, his executive assistant for 3 years, interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Anderson is asking about the first quarter numbers." David blinked, forcing himself to return to reality. In front of him, 5 managers awaited his response, all dressed in dark suits and expectant expressions. James Anderson, the manager of the Brooklyn unit, held a folder of documents and looked at him with curiosity. "Sorry, I was analyzing some expansion possibilities," David lied smoothly. "Anderson, could you repeat the question?" "We were discussing the 12% drop in sales at the Brooklyn unit during March. I believe it's due to the competition from the new food truck that set up on the corner, but I would like your opinion on strategies to reverse this situation." David forced himself to focus on the conversation, but part of his mind continued to wander. At 6:45 the next morning, he would be back at the bakery. This time he would arrive earlier. The next morning, a grey Thursday in April, David was sitting at the bread shop at 6:30, pretending to read emails on his phone while drinking overly hot coffee and eating a flavourless croissant. The anticipation made him restless, and he found himself checking the time every 2 minutes. At 6:43, the door opened. Sarah rushed in, carrying a worn cloth bag and wearing the same navy blue uniform, now visibly tighter due to her growing belly. Her face was flushed from the morning chill, and she had a slight dry cough that echoed in the quiet atmosphere of the bakery. With her keen eyes, David noticed she limped slightly on her right leg. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," Sarah greeted politely, heading straight to the counter. "2 French breads and a warm latte, please." "Good morning, dear. How are you doing? This cold isn't great for a pregnant woman, is it?" "I'm fine, thank you," Sarah replied, but David could hear the fatigue in her voice. "Lily has a bit of a cold, so the coffee needs to be warm enough for her to drink." Of course. Let me add a little extra sugar then, to give the little one some energy." David watched the interaction closely, noticing how Sarah maintained an upright posture despite her evident exhaustion. There was something about her that fascinated him, a natural dignity that transcended difficult circumstances. When she turned to leave, their eyes met for a fraction of a second. The recognition was instant. "David," Sarah stopped, surprised. You always have coffee here in the morning?" He stood up, suddenly feeling awkward. "Sometimes. It's on my way to the office." The lie came out more easily than he expected. "How are you? And your daughter?" "We're fine," she replied automatically, but then added more sincerely, "Lily has a bit of a cold, but nothing serious, and work is busy." David noticed she hadn't mentioned the money he had lent her. "Sarah, about those breads from last week." "I haven't forgotten," she interrupted quickly. "I'm just still gathering the money. But I will pay, you can be sure." "That's not what I was going to say," he said gently. "I was going to say there's no rush, and if you need anything else." Sarah stared at him, her dark eyes searching for signs of condescension or hidden interest. "Why would you do that? I really don't understand. You don't know me, you don't owe me anything." The question was too direct for an evasive answer. David took a deep breath, trying to find words that expressed his feelings without sounding paternalistic. "Honestly, I can't explain it very well, but when I look at you, I see someone who is fighting with dignity for her family. That inspires me." Sarah remained silent for a long moment, studying his face. "Do you have family?" "I have a father. My mother passed away a few years ago." The answer came out drier than he intended. "And you? Besides Lily?" "Just the 2 of us, and soon we'll be 3. She lightly touched her belly. "Lily's father disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy. The father of this one," she hesitated, "is also not in our lives." The raw honesty of her response hit him like a punch in the stomach. David realized how privileged his own life was, with all its family issues and business pressures compared to what Sarah faced daily. "Sarah," he said impulsively, "if you ever need work, my restaurants are always looking for responsible people." She looked at him with an expression that mixed gratitude and suspicion. "What kind of work?" "I only know how to clean and organize. There are many different roles in a restaurant, from cleaning to stocking, customer service." David fell silent, realizing he was sounding like a boss doing charity. "Thank you for the offer," Sarah finally said, "but I need to go. Lily is waiting for her morning coffee." She headed for the door, but stopped before leaving. "David, thank you for everything. Even if I don't understand why, thank you." And then she was gone, leaving only the faint aroma of cheap soap and the sound of rain beginning to fall again outside. David stood still in the middle of the bakery, feeling that something fundamental had changed within him, unable to name exactly what. Autumn arrived in New York, bringing with it the colder mornings and golden afternoons that painted the leaves of the Brooklyn trees with amber and rust tones. David had developed an almost obsessive routine. Casual encounters at the bakery turned into short but meaningful conversations, where Sarah gradually lowered her defenses and he discovered small details about her life. He learned that she had studied until high school, dreamed of one day having her own home, and sang lullabies to Lily every night. What David did not. It was a Friday in May when Clara Miller knocked on the door of his office with a worried expression. "Mr. Johnson, we have a problem at the Brooklyn unit. The cleaning crew didn't show up today, and we have a health inspection on Monday." David looked up from the financial reports he was analyzing. The Brooklyn unit was his newest acquisition, a cozy restaurant specializing in contemporary American cuisine, located in a charming old house on Maple Street. And what did the cleaning company say? What was their excuse? Labor issues, apparently. The entire crew went on strike due to unpaid wages. The owner of the company said she can only resolve it next week. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Have you tried other companies?" "I tried 5 different ones. They're all fully booked for the weekend. The only option would be to hire freelance cleaners, but finding reliable people on such short notice." Clara left the sentence hanging, expressing through the silence the difficulty of the situation. "All right. I'll think of something. For now, cancel my appointments for Saturday afternoon. I might have to grab a broom myself." He laughed humorlessly. When Clara left, David was left alone with his thoughts. The Brooklyn restaurant was special to him. It was the first establishment he had purchased with his own resources, without direct involvement from his father. It was also where he intended to implement a social project that had been brewing in his mind for months, hiring people in vulnerable situations, offering not just jobs, but training and a real chance for professional growth. An idea began to form in his mind. It was risky, perhaps even reckless, but there was something undeniably right about it that attracted him irresistibly. The next morning, Saturday, David arrived at the bread shop earlier than usual. By 6:20, he was already seated at his usual table, sipping a latte and mentally rehearsing how he would approach Sarah with his proposal. When she walked in, punctual as always, he stood up and went directly to meet her. "Sarah, good morning. Can I talk to you for a minute?" She looked at him surprised, noticing the urgency in his voice. "Is something wrong?" "Actually, an opportunity has come up. A job opportunity." David took a deep breath. "I need someone to do a thorough cleaning at one of my restaurants this afternoon. It's a weekend job, so I would pay double. Would you be interested?" Sarah frowned, suspicious. "Why me? You must know dozens of cleaning companies." "I do, but they're all busy and—" He hesitated. "I trust you. I know you'll do a good job." "How much would the pay be?" $200 for the day, from 2 to 10 in the evening." Sarah's eyes widened. It was almost what she earned in an entire week at the commercial buildings where she worked. $200 for one day? The restaurant is large and it needs to be spotless by Monday. It's worth every penny. Sarah was silent for a long moment, mentally calculating. With $200, she could buy a crib for the baby on the way, along with some groceries that would make a difference in her tight budget. But there was something about the whole situation that made her wary. "And my daughter? I have no one to leave her with today." "She can come along. The restaurant has a small kids area where she would be safe while you work." The offer was too tempting to refuse, but Sarah had learned to be cautious when things seemed too easy. "All right, but I want to make it clear that this is professional work, nothing beyond that." "Of course. Purely professional, David confirmed, handing her a card with the address. At 2 o'clock? At 2 o'clock. The Brooklyn restaurant was different from anything Sarah had imagined. Located in a renovated old house, it maintained original architectural elements like the polished hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, and an indoor garden with a century-old cherry tree. The decor mixed rustic elements with contemporary touches, cast-iron light fixtures, reclaimed wood tables and chairs, from different eras that created a harmonious and welcoming ensemble. "My God," Sarah murmured, holding Lily's hand as she took in the surroundings. "It's beautiful." David, who had arrived a few minutes earlier and was waiting for her at the door, smiled at her reaction. "Do you like it?" "It's different from anything I've ever seen." Sarah looked around, noticing every detail with the keen eye of someone who spent her days cleaning commercial spaces. "It must be expensive to eat here." "The focus isn't on being expensive, but on offering good food made with quality ingredients. We want it to be accessible to different audiences." Lily, a 3-year-old girl with curly hair like her mother's and big, curious eyes, let go of Sarah's hand and ran toward the kids' area that David had mentioned. It was a charming little corner, with low shelves filled with children's books, some wooden toys, and colorful cushions scattered on the floor. "Mommy, can I play here?" Lily asked, already settling among the cushions. "You can, sweetheart, but stay quiet while Mommy works, okay?" David showed Sarah where the cleaning supplies were stored, explained the specifics of the restaurant, which products to use. On each type of surface, special care for the wooden floors and extra attention in the professional kitchen. Sarah listened attentively, asking pertinent questions that demonstrated her technical knowledge. "I'll let you work in peace," David said. "I need to take care of some things at the office, but I'll be back in a few hours to see how it's going." Sarah nodded, already tying her hair back and preparing to start. As soon as David left, she felt more at ease. She put on a country music playlist on her phone, kept the volume low so as not to disturb Lily, and began to work with the efficiency of someone who knows her trade. What she didn't know was that David had not gone to the office. He was at the corner cafe, sipping espresso and watching the street bustle, a strange restlessness taking over his thoughts. Why had he made up that story about the cleaning company? The truth was that he wanted an excuse to spend more time near Sarah, to better understand who she was when she wasn't on the defensive. When he returned to the restaurant 4 hours later, David was impressed. Sarah had transformed the environment. Not only was it clean, it was reorganized in a way that improved the functionality of the space. The tables were arranged more harmoniously, the kitchen utensils organized by frequency of use, and she had even created a small arrangement with flowers she picked from the indoor garden. "Sarah, this is amazing," he said, observing her work. She was at the back of the dining room, cleaning the last of the window panes, and turned when she heard his voice. She was sweaty, with some strands of hair stuck to her forehead, but she smiled proudly at her accomplishment. "Thank you. I kinda got carried away. I hope you don't mind the changes I made." "Mind? It's much better this way. How did you know this arrangement of tables would work better?" Sarah dried her hands on the apron she had brought. "I observe a lot. In the places where I work, I always notice how people move, where they feel more comfortable. It's just a matter of paying attention." David watched her for a moment, admiring. There was something about her that went far beyond appearance or social situation. Sarah possessed practical intelligence, an ability to observe and organize that many managers he knew did not have. "Sarah, can I ask you something? Have you ever thought about doing another kind of work, besides cleaning?" She looked at him suspiciously again. "What do you mean?" You have a natural eye for organization, for improving the efficiency of spaces. Have you thought about working with that? Working with what exactly? Management, organization, team coordination. Sarah laughed, but it wasn't a cheerful laugh. David, I barely finished high school. People like me don't become managers. People like you, poor people, single mothers, pregnant women. Her voice carried a bitterness that cut through David like a blade. That's not true, he said softly. Intelligence and competence have nothing to do with money or circumstances. They have to do with character and ability. And you have both. Sarah looked at him in silence, trying to process his words. No one had ever spoken to her that way, as if she were capable of something more than cleaning bathrooms and mopping floors. Why are you saying this? She finally asked. Because it's true, and because... David hesitated, realizing he was about to reveal more than he intended. Because I would like you to consider working here, not as a cleaner, as a management assistant. The silence that followed was broken only by the voice of Lily, who had fallen asleep among the cushions and was murmuring something unintelligible. Sarah looked at her daughter, then at David, then at the restaurant around her, as if trying to understand if she was dreaming. Are you serious? Completely serious? Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the baby move in her belly, as if it were also processing the information. When she opened them again, there were tears she was trying to hold back. I need to think, was all she could say. Of course, there's no rush. But both knew there was. The baby would be born in 2 months, and the decisions Sarah made in the coming weeks would determine the future of her children and herself. 2 weeks passed since David's proposal, and Sarah had spent sleepless nights weighing the pros and cons of the offer. During the day, while scrubbing marble floors in the commercial buildings on Fifth Avenue, her mind constantly wandered to the restaurant in Brooklyn, and David's words echoing in her ears, management assistant. It was a possibility that seemed as distant from her reality as flying to the moon. Lily, sensing her mother's restlessness, had become more affectionate and clingy. In the small bed they shared in the homeless shelter, the girl would curl up next to Sarah every night, whispering, "Mommy, are you sad?" with the children's sharp intuition for sensing adult emotions. "No, my love," Sarah would reply, stroking her daughter's curly hair. "Mommy's just thinking about our future." And what future would that be? Sarah had learned early on not to nurture dreams that were too big. The daughter of a housekeeper who raised 3 children alone in the East Side, she grew up knowing that some doors simply did not open for people like her. But something in David's sincere gaze made her question those bitter certainties. On the morning of a rainy Thursday in June, Sarah arrived at the bread shop with the decision made. She would find David and give her answer. Yes, she would accept the job at the restaurant, but with clear conditions and a trial period that would allow both to assess if the partnership would work. However, fate had other plans. Mrs. Thompson greeted her with a strange expression, mixing curiosity and something that seemed like concern. "Sarah, dear, there's a weird story going around here." "What do you mean, Mrs. Thompson?" "That guy, David. It seems he's been secretly paying for your bread." Sarah felt the ground slip away beneath her feet. "What?" "That's right. Since that first day he helped you, every morning after you leave, he comes here and pays a bill in your name. For the pregnant lady, he says. I thought you knew." Sarah's blood boiled instantly. Her hands trembled as she processed the information, feeling an explosive mix of humiliation, anger, and betrayal. "How long has this been going on?" "Since the first day. It must be about 2 months now." Sarah said nothing more. She stormed out of the bakery like a hurricane, leaving Mrs. Thompson talking to herself. The navy blue uniform clung to her. Her body was drenched in the sweat of indignation, and she barely felt the heavy belly as she strode purposefully toward the address she had memorized, the office of Johnson Restaurants. The glass and steel building stood in stark contrast to Sarah's world. In the lobby, with its Carrara, marble floor and minimalist decor, she felt even more out of place, but the anger boiling in her veins was greater than any intimidation. "I need to speak with David Johnson," she said to the receptionist's security guard, trying to keep her voice steady. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he will want to see me." The guard assessed her from head to toe, noting her simple uniform and prominent belly, clearly questioning whether he should allow her to go up. "Your name?" "Sarah Johnson." After a brief phone consultation, Sarah was permitted to ascend. In the elevator, looking at her reflection in the golden mirror, she tried to organize the arguments she would unleash on David. How dare he treat her like a charity case? How dare he pretend that their meetings at the bread shop were casual, when, in reality, he was footing her food bill as if she were a pet deserving care? David's assistant, Clara, greeted her with professional politeness, but Sarah could sense her surprise at seeing a pregnant cleaner asking to speak with the CEO of the company. "Sarah," David appeared at the door of his office, smiling. "What a pleasant surprise. Did you come to give me an answer about the job offer?" "I came to give you an answer, yes," Sarah said, entering the office without ceremony. "But not about the job offer." The room was spacious and modern, with a mahogany desk that seemed larger than the room where Sarah slept with Lily. Bookshelves occupied an entire wall, and the panoramic view showed New York stretching to the horizon. David closed the door behind them, noticing from Sarah's body language that something was very wrong. "Sarah, you seem upset. Did something happen?" "Something did happen. I found out that you are a liar." David stopped in the middle of the room, genuinely confused. "What do you mean? You've been paying for my bread at the bread shop for 2 months. 2 months, David." Her voice rose an octave, laden with indignation. "And here I was like an idiot, thinking I was paying with my own sweat." David's face paled. He had asked Mrs. Thompson for discretion, but apparently the woman had failed to keep the secret. "Sarah, let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you turned me into a charity project without me knowing. How you felt good helping the poor." "A pregnant woman. It wasn't like that. How was it? For fun, to feel important." "Because I fell in love with you." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "What?" David ran his hand through his hair, realizing he had revealed his feelings in the worst possible way. "I know it sounds impossible. I know our lives are completely different. But since that first day at the bread shop, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." "You're crazy," Sarah said, shaking her head. "You don't know me. You don't know anything about me, except that I'm poor and pregnant. I know your strength, I know your dignity. I know the loving way you talk about Lily, the determination you have to give your children a better life." David took a step toward her. "I know how you reorganized my restaurant without anyone asking, because you simply can't do a job halfway." "Stop!" Sarah shouted, covering her ears with her hands. "Stop talking as if you know me. Why do you want me? To feel special? To prove something to your rich father?" The mention of David's father touched a raw nerve. "Keep my father out of this." "Why? Does he know about your crush on the pregnant cleaner? I bet he would love to know that his little boy is playing Romeo and Juliet with the lower class." "Sarah, you're being unfair." "Unfair?" she exploded. "I'm the one being unfair. You played with me for 2 months, made me believe I was managing to pay for my own food with my own work, made me feel... Sarah's voice faltered, and for the first time since entering the office, she seemed vulnerable. David realized that Behind the anger lay a deep pain, the pain of someone who had been humiliated in a way that touched her greatest insecurities. "Made me feel like I was capable of something," she finished in a whisper. "Like I could be more than I am. And now to find out that it was all just love," David said softly. "Sarah, I fell in love with the woman you are, not the situation you're in. The strong woman who protects her children, who works hard, who has dreams even when everything is against her." Sarah stared at him for a long moment, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You don't understand. You will never understand. For you, this is a romance. For me, it's my life. My daughter needs to eat every day. The baby that's here in my belly needs a future. I can't afford to believe in fairy tales." "You don't need to believe in fairy tales. You need to believe me." "How can I believe you after all this lying?" David fell silent, knowing she was right. He had started everything off on the wrong foot, driven by good intentions, but using methods that undermined exactly what he admired most about Sarah, her independence and dignity. "You're right," he finally said. "I messed up. I really messed up. I should have been honest from the start." Sarah turned toward the door, paused, and looked back at him one last time. "Do you know what the difference is between us, David? For you, love is a luxury. For me, trust is a necessity for survival. And you just broke the only thing I had to give: my trust." She left, leaving David alone in his luxurious office with a panoramic view of New York and the bitter taste of knowing he had lost the only thing that truly mattered in his privileged life. Outside the building, Sarah walked under the light June rain, feeling the baby moving restlessly in her belly, as if it too was processing the storm of emotions she had just experienced. For the first time in 2 months, she would have to pay for her own bread at Mrs. Thompson's bread shop. And strangely, that prospect no longer frightened her. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation in David's office, and Sarah had closed herself off in a protective shell, focusing solely on work and preparing for the baby's arrival. Conversations with Lily were limited to the essentials. Did you brush your teeth? Did you finish lunch? Do you want Mommy to tell you a story? But the girl sensed that something had changed in her mother. Sarah no longer hummed while tidying up the room in the homeless shelter, nor did she smile when Lily showed her crayon drawings. In the homeless shelter on Glicerio Street, where they had lived for 6 months, Sarah had become an almost ghostly presence. She woke up at 5 in the morning, got Lily ready for the day at the community daycare, worked from 6 to 2 as a cleaner in 3 different buildings, picked up her daughter, returned to the shelter, helped with the communal dinner, and collapsed into the narrow bed they shared. The routine was exhausting, but it kept her too busy to think about David Johnson, or at least that was what she tried to convince herself. The truth was that in the quiet hours of the early morning, when Lily was fast asleep beside her, Sarah found herself reliving every word of their conversation in the office. Anger had transformed into something more complex, a mix of hurt, longing, and a question that haunted her. What if he really was telling the truth about his feelings? But whenever that thought surfaced, she pushed it back to the depths of her mind. Sarah had learned early on that women like her could not afford to believe in men like David. The difference between their worlds was an insurmountable chasm, and she had already been humiliated enough. It was a Tuesday, May 15th, when everything changed irreversibly. Sarah was on the night shift at the commercial building on 5th Avenue, where she had been working since 6 in the evening. The 8-story building housed small businesses, accounting offices, dental clinics, a graphic materials store on the ground floor. It was her last shift before the baby was due the following week, and she felt the weight of her belly making every movement more difficult. At 10 o'clock, while cleaning the bathroom on the 5th floor, Sarah felt the first contraction. A dull pain that started in her back and radiated to the front, making her lean against the grey marble sink. It can't be, she murmured to her reflection in the mirror. There's still a week to go. But babies, as Sarah would soon discover, have their own schedules. Over the next hour, the contractions intensified and became more frequent. Sarah tried to keep working, scrubbing the sixth-floor with increasingly slow movements and constant pauses to breathe. At 11:15, as she was descending the stairs to fetch more cleaning supplies from the basement, a stronger contraction made her grip the iron railing, gasping. "Calm down, Sarah," she told herself. "It could be a false alarm. First-time mothers always think it's the first pain." But Sarah had been through this once before with Lily, and her body recognized the signs. This baby was in a hurry to enter the world. Outside, a typical May storm was beginning to form. The wind was swaying the trees on Fifth Avenue, and the first heavy drops of rain splattered against the building's windows. The weather perfectly mirrored the turmoil Sarah felt inside. At 12:30, she had to admit the reality. She was in labor. The contractions were coming every 5 minutes, and she could barely stand. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone to call emergency services, but found that the battery was dead. The charger was in her bag, stored in the locker on the first floor. "Damn!" Sarah cursed, one of the few times she used profanity, leaning against the wall of the sixth-floor corridor. The pain was becoming unbearable, and she knew she wouldn't be able to descend 6 flights of stairs to get the charger. It was then that she heard the sound of the elevator. David Johnson had decided to make a nighttime inspection visit to his properties, a habit he had developed in recent weeks as a way to keep himself busy and not think about Sarah. Not that it worked very well. She occupied his thoughts constantly, like a song that gets stuck in your head and won't go away. That night, he had checked the restaurants in Brooklyn and was on his way home when he decided to stop by the building on Fifth Avenue, where David had purchased a small office on the 3rd floor to expand the company's administrative offices. It was almost morning when he parked his black truck in the visitor's spot. The storm had truly begun, and David ran from the garage to the entrance of the building, the heavy raindrops drumming on his leather jacket. He used the key to enter. As the owner of one of the offices, he had access to the building outside of business hours. The elevator ascended slowly to the 3rd floor, but when the doors opened, David heard something that made him stop, a low, almost animalistic moan coming from somewhere above. At first he thought it might be a robbery or someone injured. He grabbed his phone, ready to call the police, but then he heard it again, and recognized it was a female voice, in evident distress. "Hello? Is anyone there? Do you need help?" he shouted, heading for the stairs. From the 6th floor, Sarah's voice came weak but desperate. "Here, please, someone help me." David raced up the 3 flights of stairs, 2 steps at a time, following the voice. When he reached the 6th floor, he found a scene he would never forget. Sarah was crouched in the hallway, leaning against the wall, breathing heavily between contractions. Her face was pale and sweaty, and she was holding her belly with both hands. "Sarah, my God, what are you doing here?" "David." She looked at him with a mix of relief and astonishment. The baby is coming. Now? Here?" "It wasn't planned," she said through clenched teeth, another contraction overtaking her body. David knelt beside her, his mind racing to find a solution. "Come on, I'll take you to the hospital. My car is in the garage." "There's no time," Sarah gasped. "The contractions are too close together, and outside, it's a hell of a storm." As if to confirm her words, a thunderclap echoed outside, followed by the sound of rain intensifying. Through the hallway windows it was clear that the streets were turning into rivers. "Then let's find a more comfortable place," David said, helping her to her feet. "Is there an office open on this floor?" "The accounting office," Sarah indicated with her head. "The door is propped open. They forgot to lock it." David helped her walk to the office, which was small but clean, with grey carpet and some leather chairs for clients. It wasn't exactly the ideal environment for a birth, but it would be better than the cold hallway. "Sarah, I need to call an ambulance," David said, pulling out his phone. "It won't get here in time," she repeated, but this time her voice carried panic. "David, I think the baby is coming now." And it was. Between contractions, Sarah felt the unmistakable pressure of the baby's head positioning itself. She had been through this once before. She knew the signs. Okay, David said, trying to stay calm despite his racing heart. I've seen some movies about this. Let's stay calm." Movies? Sarah would have laughed if she weren't experiencing the greatest pain of her life. "David, you have no idea what you're talking about." "Then teach me," he said, simply taking off his jacket and improvising a cleaner spot on the floor of the office. "Tell me what I need to do." The next 45 minutes were the most intense of both their lives. David, who had grown up in luxury and had never witnessed anything more dramatic than a tense business meeting, found himself in the role of an improvised midwife. Sarah, between devastating contractions, guided him with the experience of someone who had been through this before, and the determination of a woman who had no choice but to be strong. "The head," David said, amazed, when he finally saw the first part of the baby emerge. "Sarah, I see the head." "Don't pull," she gasped. "Let it come naturally." Outside, the storm reached its peak, with winds shaking the windows and rain pounding against the glass like hail. But inside the small accounting office, illuminated only by the fluorescent ceiling light, a miracle was happening. At 2:27 a.m. on May 16th, Michael Johnson was born, a boy weighing 7 pounds and 2 ounces, who cried loudly and strongly as he fully emerged from his mother's womb. "It's a boy," David said, his voice choked, carefully, holding the bloodied and slippery baby. "Sarah, he's a beautiful boy." Sarah was exhausted, but her eyes sparkled when she saw her son for the first time. "Michael," she murmured. "You are Michael." David handed the baby to her with a gentleness he didn't know he possessed, watching the expression of pure love that overtook Sarah's face. In that moment, she was no longer the proud and suspicious cleaner who had yelled at him in his office. She was simply a mother, holding her newborn child, vulnerable and radiant at the same time. "Thank you," she said softly, looking at him over the baby's head. "Thank you for being here." "Thank you for letting me be here," he replied just as softly. Outside, the storm began to subside, as if nature also recognized that something sacred had happened in that small office. And when the ambulance finally arrived, 20 minutes later, it found a scene that would remain etched in the memory of everyone involved. A mother, her newborn baby, and a man who had been forever transformed by the experience of helping a life come into the world. At the hospital, while Sarah and Michael were examined by the doctors, David remained in the waiting room, still processing what had happened. His hands were still slightly trembling, and he could smell the hospital scent mixed with his own cologne, creating an olfactory memory he would carry forever. When he was finally allowed to see them, he found Sarah lying in the hospital bed, with Michael sleeping in her arms. She seemed small and fragile against the white sheets, but there was a serene strength emanating from her that left him speechless. "How are you?" he asked. "Fine. Tired, but fine." Sarah looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully decipher. "David, what happened today?" "It was the most important day of my life," he said without hesitation. Sarah fell silent for a long moment, observing the peaceful face of her son. "You were the first person to hold my child besides me." "It was an honor." "You don't need to feel obligated to anything because of that," she said quickly. I know it was just a coincidence you were there. Sarah, David moved closer to the bed, speaking softly so as not to wake the baby. It wasn't a coincidence, not completely. She stared at him, waiting for an explanation. I have spent every night for the past 3 weeks driving around the city, looking for, I don't know what, looking for a way to find you, to apologize, to have a chance to talk properly. He sighed. Today, when I decided to stop at that building, it was because it was one of the last places I hadn't searched for you. You were looking for me. Every night. In bakeries, restaurants, office buildings, like a madman. David ran his hand through his hair. Sarah, I know I messed everything up. I know you have no reason to trust me, but what happened today changed us. Changed me, at least. Sarah remained silent, alternating her gaze between David and Michael. The baby sighed in his sleep, a soft sound that echoed in the quiet room. Do you want to meet your daughter? She asked unexpectedly. How? Lily, do you want to meet my daughter? Right this time, not as a boss or benefactor, as someone who is part of her brother's birth story. David felt his heart race. I would love to. Tomorrow, come tomorrow afternoon to the hospital, and David? Sarah looked him directly in the eyes. Come as yourself, not as the CEO, not as the rich man trying to help the poor girl. Come as the person who held my son when he entered the world. I promise, David said, and for the first time in weeks, he felt hope blooming in his chest. When he left the hospital at 5 in the morning, the city was beginning to wake under the clear sky left by the storm. David drove home slowly, processing the most transformative night of his life, knowing that nothing would be the same between him and Sarah. What of them imagined was that the true trials of their relationship were just beginning. New York Hospital awoke with that peculiar atmosphere of healthcare establishments, a mix of hope and apprehension that lingered in the immaculate white corridors. Sarah woke up at 6 in the morning, not from the noise of nurses changing shifts, but from the feeling that something fundamental had changed in her life during the night. Michael slept peacefully on her chest, breathing with the gentle rhythm of newborns, oblivious to the complexities of the world he had just entered. She had spent the first hours of the morning mulling over the conversation with David, analyzing every word, every expression. The anger she had carried for weeks had transformed into something more confusing, a mix of gratitude, vulnerability, and a question she didn't want to ask herself. Could it be possible that he was really telling the truth about his feelings? On the other side of the city, in the Johnson mansion located on a 2,000-square-meter lot in the Upper East Side, David faced a very different morning. He had arrived home at 5:30, still in wrinkled and stained clothes from the delivery, his hair disheveled, and an expression that oscillated between euphoria and exhaustion. He took a long shower, trying to process the contradictory emotions swirling in his chest. But when he came down for breakfast at 8 o'clock, he found his father, Robert Johnson, waiting for him in the dining room with an expression that did not bode well. Robert Johnson, at 62, was the embodiment of the successful patriarch. Impeccably styled grey hair, tailored suits that disguised the beginning of a prominent belly, and blue eyes that had lost the ability to show affection decades ago when his wife died, and he decided that showing feelings was a sign of weakness. He was a man who had built a culinary empire through iron discipline and pragmatic decisions, and who saw his son as his only personal disappointment, brilliant in business, but romantically irresponsible, in his words. David, where have you been all night? The question came accompanied by the metallic sound of a spoon stirring the latte in the English porcelain cup. Taking care of personal matters, David replied evasively, pouring himself coffee from the Italian machine that occupied a corner of the open-plan kitchen integrated with the living room. Personal? Matters that leave you smelling like a hospital? David stopped, realizing he had underestimated his father's observational skills. "I helped someone in a medical emergency." "Someone? Or that pregnant cleaner that Clara told me you've been chasing?" David's blood ran cold. "How did you know?" Robert smiled coldly, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Son, do you really think I don't keep track of your steps, especially when they involve decisions that could affect our family and our business? You had me investigated. I protected our interests, and I discovered interesting things about your crush." Robert opened a manila folder that was on the table, revealing photographs and documents. Sarah Johnson, 24 years old, single mother, homeless shelter resident, history of work as a cleaner, and now, from what I was informed this morning, mother of another child with an unknown father. David felt the anger boiling in his veins. "You have no right." "I have every right when it comes to protecting the name of our family and the future of the company I built with my own hands." Robert stood up, walking towards the window overlooked the perfectly manicured garden. "David, you are my only heir. Everything I build will be yours one day, but I will not allow you to destroy our reputation because of a romantic whim with a woman who clearly is only interested in your money. She is not interested in my money. In fact, she rejected any help I offered. Obviously. It's the oldest strategy in the book, playing hard to get to increase value." Robert returned to the table, staring directly at his son. "David, you are 32 years old. It's time to stop playing around and take on real responsibilities. Victoria Sanders returned from Paris last week. Her family is interested in resuming negotiations about a possible marriage." Victoria Sanders. The name hit David like a punch to the stomach. The daughter of a traditional family in New York, heir to a luxury hotel chain, an ex-girlfriend who had ended their relationship 3 years ago when she decided to study hotel management in France. A beautiful, educated woman from the same social circle. Everything a man like him should want, according to the standards of his class. "I am not going to marry Victoria." "You will, because it makes sense for everyone involved. A marriage that will strengthen both our business and theirs, uniting two fortunes, two family traditions." Robert leaned over the table. "And you will forget this ridiculous story with the cleaner before it causes a scandal that destroys everything I have worked for." "And what if I say no?" "Then you will be cut off from the family business. No profit share, no executive position, no inheritance. You are free to pursue your romantic life as you wish, but not with the Montenegro money funding your fantasies." The ultimatum hung in the air, like a guillotine ready to drop. David knew his father well, enough to know these were not empty words. Robert Montenegro was capable of disinheriting his own son if he deemed it necessary to protect the empire he had built. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Sarah faced her own family pressures. Lily had arrived at the hospital at 10 in the morning, brought by Sarah, the coordinator of the homeless shelter where they lived. The 3-year-old girl ran down the hallway toward her mother, her curly hair bouncing with each step. A worn-out rag doll clutched against her chest. "Mommy, Mommy, where is the baby?" Lily climbed onto the hospital bed with the natural agility of children, stopping abruptly when she saw her little brother sleeping in Sarah's arms. "He's so tiny," she whispered, amazed. "Yes, sweetheart, this is Michael, your little brother." Sarah smiled, feeling her heart swell with pure joy at seeing her 2 children together for the first time. "Can I give him a kiss?" "You can, but gently." Lily kissed her brother's forehead softly, who made a little face without waking up. "Hi, Michael. I'm your big sister. I will take care of you." Sarah watched the scene from the corner of the room, but Sarah could sense something disturbing in her expression. At 50, Sarah had dedicated her life to working with vulnerable families and had developed a keen instinct for detecting problems. "Sarah, can I talk to you? In private?" Sarah indicated the hallway with her eyes. "Lily, stay here with Michael for a minute, okay? Don't leave the bed." "Okay, Mommy. I'll tell him a story." In the hallway, Sarah got straight to the point. "Sarah, tell me the truth. Who is the father of this child?" "I already told you, Sarah. It's complicated. And the man who brought you to the hospital. The nurses said he identified himself as David Montenegro." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "How did you know?" "Dear, I've been working in this field for 20 years. I know everyone who is someone in New York, especially when it comes to rich people who can fund our projects." Sarah crossed her arms. "David Montenegro is the heir to one of the largest fortunes in the city. What was a man like him doing with you last night?" He helped me. It was a coincidence." "Sarah, for heaven's sake, don't treat me like an idiot." Sarah lowered her voice, but her tone remained firm. "Are you involved with this man?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. "My God, Sarah, do you have any idea of the trouble you're in?" "It's not trouble. He comes from a family that can ruin your life if they want," Sarah interrupted. "Sarah, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. Men like David Montenegro don't marry women like you. They play around for a while, feel special for helping a poor girl, and then go back to their world and marry women of their own class." The words echoed the same doubts that Sarah carried deep in her heart, but hearing someone verbalize them so crudely made her feel as if she had been slapped in the face. "You don't know him. I know men, and I know money, and I know how the two mix." Sarah held Sarah's shoulders. "Dear, you have 2 children to raise. You can't afford to believe in fairy tales. If this man wants to help you, accept the help, but keep your feet on the ground and your heart protected. And what if it's real? What if he really... And what if it's not? Sarah, are you going to bet your children's future on the possibility that a millionaire has fallen madly in love with a cleaner?" Sarah shook her head. "This isn't a Hollywood movie, dear. This is real life." When they returned to the room, Sarah found Lily humming a children's song to Michael, who had woken up and was watching her with his still oversized dark eyes. The image of her 2 children together should have brought pure joy, but now it was tainted by Sarah's words and the growing awareness that the decisions she made in the coming days, that would determine the future for all of them. In the afternoon, when David arrived at the hospital carrying a discreet bouquet of white flowers and a wrapped gift for Lily, he found Sarah more distant and defensive than the night before. The girl, however, greeted him with the natural spontaneity of children. "Are you the guy who helped my mummy?" Lily asked, climbing onto Sarah's lap and studying David with curiosity. "I am. And you must be Lily, the one your mum talks so much about. She talks about me, always. She says you're very smart and brave." Lily smiled, satisfied, and opened the gift that David brought, a children's storybook with colorful illustrations. "Mommy, he brought a story." "That's great, sweetheart." Sarah maintained a forced smile, but David could sense the tension in her posture. The next 2 hours were a strange mix of familiarity and distance. David held Michael again, marveling at the sensation of the baby in his arms, while Lily showed him the drawing she had made in the hospital. But Sarah remained observant, her expression guarded, as if she were analyzing his intentions. When Lily fell asleep in the chair next to the bed, lulled by the exhaustion of emotion, David finally found the courage to address what he was feeling. "Sarah, you seem different today." "What do you mean?" "More distant, as if you're regretting letting me come here." Sarah fell silent for a long moment, looking at Michael, who was sleeping in her arms. "David, last night was intense, and maybe I confused gratitude with other things." "Other things like what?" "Like the idea that this," she gestured between the two of them, "could somehow work." David felt his heart race. "And it can't? Do you really think it can?" "Honestly." Sarah looked him directly in the eye. "Do you think your family will accept a woman like me, that your friends will welcome me with open arms at your fancy dinners, that I will fit into your world without becoming a joke? Sarah, and more importantly, do you think I want that? That I want to live forever being seen as the lucky cleaner, the poor girl who was saved by the charming prince?" The questions hit David like shards of glass, each exposing insecurities he had preferred to ignore. "I think you're underestimating yourself, and underestimating me too. Maybe. Or maybe I'm being realistic for the first time in weeks." Michael began to cry, a low and persistent wail that broke the tension of the moment. Sarah adjusted him, whispering sweet words until he calmed down. "Sarah, give me a chance, a real chance to prove that—" "David," she interrupted him, but her voice was softer. "I know you're a good man. I know your intentions are sincere. But we both know this is more complicated than we want to admit." "Complicated doesn't mean impossible." "No, but it means dangerous, for me, for my children." Sarah sighed. "I can't afford to gamble on love, David. I need to gamble on security. What if I could offer both?" The question hung in the air between them, laden with promises and uncertainties. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, searching his eyes for some assurance she knew he couldn't provide. "Go home, David," she finally said. "Think carefully about what you really want, and what you can really offer. Because I won't survive falling in love with you if it's not real." When David left the hospital that afternoon, he carried with him the awareness that he was at a point of no return. He would have to choose between the world he had always known and the woman he had fallen in love with, and whichever choice he made, someone would end up hurt. What he didn't yet know was that the choice might not be entirely his. 2 months had passed since Michael's birth, and a peculiar routine had established itself between Sarah and David. They were not together. Sarah had made that clear since the hospital, but they were also not completely apart. David visited the three of them once a week, always bringing something for the children: books for Lily, clothes for Michael, expensive diapers that Sarah reluctantly accepted because she knew her son needed them. Sarah had returned to work when Michael was 6 weeks old, but now she divided her time between only 2 commercial buildings, earning a slightly better income that allowed her to maintain a small rented studio in the West Side near downtown. It was a tiny space, a room that served as a bedroom, living room and kitchen, with a shared bathroom in the hallway. But it was hers. For the first time in years, Sarah had her own address. David's visits always followed the same pattern. He would arrive in the late afternoon on Saturdays, play with Lily, hold Michael for hours while the baby slept in his arms, chat with Sarah about everyday matters, never about relationships or the future, and leave at dusk. It was a delicate dance of closeness and distance that satisfied and frustrated both of them at the same time. David, for his part, had thrown himself into work as a way to forget the constant pressure from his father about marrying Victoria. The threats of disinheritance loomed over his head like a sword of Damocles, but he continued to postpone any definitive decision. Victoria had returned from Paris more sophisticated and determined, regularly appearing at the Montenegro family social events and being subtly introduced as the future daughter-in-law by Robert. It was during one of those Saturday afternoons, at the end of July, that Sarah made an announcement that would change the course of everyone involved. "David, I signed up for a course," she said casually, while preparing a bottle for Michael in the small kitchen. "What kind of course?" David was sitting on the floor of the studio, helping Lily put together an animal puzzle. Social entrepreneurship. It's a city program for people. In a vulnerable situation, they want to start their own business. Sarah tested the temperature of the milk on her wrist before she began to feed Michael. "The classes are in the evening 3 times a week." David looked up, surprised. "That's fantastic. When does it start?" "Next Monday. It lasts 6 months. And at the end, the best projects compete for micro-funding to get the idea off the ground." "And what's your idea?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, as if she wasn't sure whether she should share her dreams. "Homemade food. I want to set up a homemade meal service for companies, regional dishes, lovingly made food, just like mothers used to make." David's eyes lit up. "Sarah, that's a brilliant idea. There's a huge market for that, especially downtown." "Do you think so?" The insecurity in her voice contrasted with the determination she was trying to project. "I know how to cook well. I learned from my grandmother when I was little. And I've always noticed that the office workers where I work complain about the industrialized food they buy on the street. I think it's genius. And if you need any guidance on business, plans, marketing—" "No!" Sarah interrupted quickly. "I want to do this on my own, completely on my own." David understood the implicit message and didn't insist, but made a mental note. He would keep track of Sarah's progress from a distance, and if an opportunity arose, to help her without her knowing. The entrepreneurship course took place at the Professional Development Center in Liberty, a modest 3-story building that operated in an old municipal school. The class consisted of 30 people, mostly women between 25 and 40 years old, many of whom were single mothers or heads of households, looking for an alternative to formal employment. Sarah stood out from the first class. Teacher John Carter, a 50-year-old man with experience in microcredit and social development, was impressed by Sarah's ability to absorb complex management concepts and turn them into practical applications. During the financial planning exercises, she demonstrated a natural aptitude for numbers that surprised even herself. "Sarah, have you ever worked with accounting?" John Carter asked after a class on cash flow. "Never, but I've always managed the household budget very well. When you have little money, you quickly learn how to make every penny count. That's more valuable than many diplomas out there," he smiled. "Keep it up." Weeks turned into months, and Sarah flourished in the academic environment. She discovered that she had a knack for public speaking when she presented her preliminary project to the class. She learned to use spreadsheets on the school's old computers. She developed a simple but effective logo for her future company, Home Flavors, Sarah Johnson. During this time, David continued his weekly visits, but now Sarah spoke excitedly about the course, her classmates, and the ideas swirling in her head. There was a different energy about her, a growing confidence that made her shine in a way he had never seen before. "Do you know what I discovered?" Sarah said one afternoon while feeding Michael. "I am smart. I always knew I wasn't dumb, but I never knew I was really smart." "I always knew," David replied simply. "How could you know if I didn't even know?" "Because intelligence isn't about diplomas or money. It's about how you solve problems, how you adapt, how you learn." David watched her with admiration. "And you are one of the smartest people I know." The compliment made her blush, but she didn't reject it as she would have a few months ago. It was during the 15th week of the course that Sarah made a discovery that would shake all her certainties. That night's class was about funding sources for small businesses, and John Carter had invited a special speaker, a businessman who funded social projects in the city. "Everyone, today we have with us Dr. Robert Alvarez, Director of the Sustainable Development Foundation. He will talk about microcredit and investment opportunities for your projects." Sarah almost choked when she heard the name of the foundation. It was the same, organization that had sponsored the course, whose name appeared discreetly on all the educational materials. A terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. After the lecture, Sarah stayed in the room while the other students left. She approached John Carter with her heart racing. "Professor, can I ask a question about the foundation that sponsors the course?" "Of course, Sarah. What do you want to know?" "Who are the sponsors, the main donors?" John Carter hesitated for a moment. "Why do you want to know?" "It's important to me." "Well, there are several contributors, but the main ones are 3 business groups in the city. One of them is Johnson Restaurants, that restaurant chain." Sarah's world collapsed. "Johnson Restaurants?" "Yes, they are one of the most socially engaged companies in the city. The owner's son, David Johnson, is actively involved in the decisions about which projects to support." John Carter looked at her curiously. "Why? Do you know him?" Sarah couldn't respond. She stumbled out of the room, feeling betrayed in a way that cut deeper than any previous humiliation. She arrived home at 11 o'clock, found the neighbor who was watching the kids asleep on the couch, paid for the services, and sat in the darkness for hours, processing the magnitude of the manipulation. David had funded the course. He had probably influenced her selection. Maybe even John Carter knew about their connection. Everything, absolutely everything, had been orchestrated by him. The next morning, Sarah called David's cell phone before 6 o'clock. "Hello? Sarah? Is something wrong?" His voice was sleepy, worried. "I found out." "Found out what?" "About the foundation, about the course, about everything." The silence on the other end of the line confirmed all her suspicions. "Sarah, let me explain." "No." Her voice was cold, controlled. "I don't want an explanation. I want you to never show up here again. Please, get in touch with me or my children. Sarah, please. You lied again. After everything we talked about trust, about honesty, you kept manipulating me as if I were a doll without a brain. It wasn't like that. I just wanted to give you an opportunity. You wanted to control me. You wanted to feel like the hero saving the poor girl." Tears finally came, filled with a pain that went beyond betrayal. "David, you don't understand. You will never understand. For the first time in my life, I was discovering what I am capable of. I was feeling smart, capable, independent, and now I find out that even that was a lie. The course is real, Sarah. Your talent is real. Your achievements are yours." "Achievements? What achievements? I don't even know if I passed the course on merit or because you paid for me to pass." "You passed on merit. I only funded the scholarship. I didn't influence anything else." "Stop!" Sarah shouted, waking Michael in the crib beside her. "Stop lying! Stop treating me like I'm an idiot." "If you really loved me, you would have been honest with me from the start." "I love you. That's why I did all this." "No. You love the idea of loving me. You love the feeling of being the good man who helps the needy woman. But you don't truly love me because those who truly love respect. And you never respected me." The call ended, and David stared at the phone, feeling as if he had lost the most important thing in his life. Sarah, in turn, looked at the children who were beginning to wake up and made a decision that would change everything. She would finish the course, develop her business project, and prove to herself and to the world that she was capable of succeeding without anyone's help. What she didn't know was that David would not give up easily, and that the coming weeks would bring revelations that would force both to confront painful truths about love, pride, and the seemingly insurmountable barriers between their worlds. 3 months had passed since Sarah discovered the funding for the course, and she had taken refuge in an iron determination that impressed everyone around her. She finished the entrepreneurship program with the second-best grade in the class, developed a detailed business plan for her homemade meal service, and, most importantly, she had achieved this without any contact with David Johnson. The beginning of spring brought a renewed energy for Sarah. Michael, at 4 months, was a smiling and healthy baby who slept well at night, allowing her to maintain her work routine as a cleaner during the day and dedicate her nights to developing her business project. Lily, now almost 4 years old, had adapted perfectly to life in the new home and attended a nearby community daycare where she stood out for her intelligence and creativity. David's absence was felt by everyone, especially by Lily, who occasionally asked about the man who brought the book and didn't understand why he had stopped visiting them. Sarah vaguely explained that he was traveling, but with each question from her daughter, she felt a pang of pain that she tried to ignore. David, on his side, had thrown himself into work with an almost desperate intensity. He expanded the Johnson network to 2 new locations, implemented social responsibility programs in all restaurants, and became a frequent presence at charity events in high society. Robert Johnson watched with satisfaction what he interpreted as his son finally maturing and taking on responsibilities, while Victoria Sanders intensified her efforts to win him back. But beneath the apparent normality, David carried an emptiness that no professional success could fill. He had tried to forget Sarah in every possible way: business trips, social gatherings, even some romantic dates arranged by friends, but everything felt artificial, lacking substance. The image of her holding newborn Michael, the memory of Lily laughing in his arms, the recollection of sincere conversations on Saturday afternoons, all of this haunted him constantly. It was during the organization of the Community Summer Festival that fate decided to intertwine Sarah and David's lives again in a way neither of them expected. Sarah had volunteered to participate in the social entrepreneurship program of the Summer Festival of the West Side, an annual event that brought together local small businesses to sell handmade products and homemade food. It was the perfect opportunity to test her business concept in a real environment, with real customers and immediate feedback. For 2 weeks, she prepared meticulously. She developed a special menu for the festival: chicken croquettes seasoned with grandma's spices, gourmet chocolate truffles with a hint of sea salt, sweet corn pudding made with fresh corn, and her specialty, a savory meat pie with creamy mashed root vegetables that melted in the mouth. The morning of Saturday, June 23rd, dawned sunny and full of promise. Sarah arrived at Liberty Square at 7 o'clock, carrying thermal boxes, pots, and all the culinary arsenal she had managed to gather. Her booth was simple: 2 tables covered with red and white checkered tablecloths, a cardboard sign with the name Home Flavors written by hand, with care, and a laminated menu with prices she had carefully calculated to be accessible yet profitable. Lily helped her as a little assistant, organizing napkins and arranging the plastic chairs they had borrowed from the daycare. Michael slept peacefully in the stroller next to the booth, protected from the sun by a colorful umbrella. "Mummy, are you nervous?" Lily asked, noticing how Sarah checked and rechecked every detail of the presentation. "A little, sweetheart. It's the first day of our business. Everything will be fine. Your food is the tastiest in the world." The simplicity and confidence of her daughter brought a genuine smile to Sarah's face. "Thank you, my assistant." The first hours were slow. Some curious onlookers stopped, sniffed, asked about prices, but few bought. Sarah began to feel anxious, calculating mentally about the costs of the ingredients versus the practically non-existent sales. But at 11 o'clock, something changed. A group of office workers from a nearby building appeared looking for lunch, drawn by the aroma wafting from Mrs. Johnson's stall. The first customer ordered a chicken croquette just to try, and after the first bite asked for 3 more. The second customer sampled the savory meat pie and called her friends to try it too. "My God, where did you learn to cook like this?" asked a middle-aged woman who had bought 2 portions of the savory meat pie to take home. "I learned from my grandmother," Mrs. Johnson replied, feeling her chest swell with pride. "She always said that the secret is in the love and patience." From noon on, Mrs. Johnson's stall did not stop. A small line formed, people recommended it to others, and customers returned to buy more. The aroma of her chicken croquettes spread across the square, competing with the smell of roasted corn and cotton candy from other stalls. "Mrs. Johnson," called a man in a tailored suit who had bought a chicken croquette and returned 15 minutes later. "Do you take orders? I work at a company over on Avenue of the Americas and would like to know if you could prepare meals for the office." "Of course. How many people?" "About 20, more or less. It would be for Monday." Mrs. Johnson felt her heart race. This was exactly the type of customer she had dreamed of when developing her business plan. "Perfectly possible. Let me take down your contact information." By 2 in the afternoon, Mrs. Johnson had sold almost everything she had prepared. Her hands were dirty from handling food and money. Lily had chocolate truffles smeared on her face from a delighted customer, and Michael was peacefully sleeping amidst all the commotion. It was while she was counting the money collected, more than she earned in a week as a cleaner, that she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Excuse me, do you still have chicken croquettes?" Mrs. Johnson turned and felt the world stop. David Johnson was there, wearing jeans and a navy polo shirt, much more casual look than she was used to seeing him in. He looked thinner, with subtle dark circles suggesting sleepless nights, but his eyes sparkled when they met hers. "David," she whispered, feeling as if she were seeing a ghost. "Hi, Mrs. Johnson." His voice was hesitant, almost shy. Can I buy a chicken croquette?" The initial shock gave way to a complex mix of emotions. Mrs. Johnson quickly glanced around, noticing that some people were watching their interaction with curiosity. "Sure," she said, forcing a professional tone. "How many do you want?" "One to try, and, if it's as good as it looks, maybe a few to take." Mrs. Johnson served a still-warm chicken croquette on a paper plate, her hands trembling slightly. David bit carefully, and his expression transformed immediately. "Mrs. Johnson," he said after chewing and swallowing, "this is amazing. Seriously, it's the best chicken croquette I've ever had." Despite all the hurt, Mrs. Johnson couldn't hide a small smile of pride. "Thank you. I'll take 10. And that savory meat pie looks fantastic too." As Mrs. Johnson packed the food, Lily finally noticed David's presence. "Uncle David," she shouted, running to hug his legs. "You're back from your trip." David bent down to be at the girl's height, feeling his heart tighten with the genuine joy on her face. "Hi, Princess. How are you? And Michael?" "I'm good. Michael is sleeping, but he has grown so much." "Want to see?" "Of course I do." David followed Lily to the stroller where Michael was sleeping, and Mrs. Johnson could see him trying to control his emotions as he observed how much the baby had grown in the last 3 months. Michael had doubled in size, his dark hair thicker and his facial features more defined. "He's beautiful," David said softly, not trying to touch the baby but clearly moved. "Mummy, can Uncle David have lunch with us today?" Lily asked with the naturalness of children. Mrs. Johnson felt her face heat up. "Honey, Uncle David must be busy." "Actually," David stood up looking directly at Mrs. Johnson, "I would love to, if you let me." The invitation hung in the air between them, laden with 3 months of silence and unresolved hurt. Mrs. Johnson knew she should say no, that nothing had changed between them, that he was still the man who had lied and manipulated, But something in the way he looked at Michael, in Lily's joy at seeing him, in the apparent sincerity of his expression, made her hesitate. "I still have to sell the rest of the food." "I can wait. I can even help if you want." "You? Help at a food stall?" David smiled, the first genuine smile Mrs. Johnson had seen on his face in months. "Why not? I was a waiter when I was a teenager at my father's first restaurant. It should be like riding a bike." And so it was that David Johnson, heir to a culinary empire, spent the afternoon helping Mrs. Johnson sell chicken croquettes and chocolate truffles at a community summer festival. He proved surprisingly efficient, chatting with customers, explaining the dishes with genuine enthusiasm, and even managing to convince some hesitant ones to try the famous savory meat pie. "You have a talent for sales," Mrs. Johnson commented during a break, watching him interact naturally with a family that was choosing what to buy. "I learned by watching my father. He always said it doesn't matter if you're selling caviar or hot dogs. What matters is believing in what you're offering." "And do you believe?" David looked her in the eyes. "Completely. This food is extraordinary, Mrs. Johnson, and I'm not saying this to flatter you." By 5 in the afternoon, when the festival began to disperse, Mrs. Johnson had sold absolutely everything. Her boxes were empty, her wallet was full, and she had noted the contacts of 5 potential customers interested in regular orders. "Mommy, can I play for a little bit?" Lily pointed to the makeshift playground that had been set up on the other side of the square. Sarah and David stood in the park. "You can, but stay where I can see you." Alone for the first time in months, Sarah and David fell silent for a moment, organizing utensils and folding towels. Michael had woken up and was watching everything with wide, curious eyes. "Sarah," David finally said, "I know you don't want to hear me, but I need to apologize. Again." "David, let me finish, please." He stopped organizing and turned to her completely. "You were right. About everything. I lied, manipulated, treated you as if you were incapable of handling things on your own, and the worst part is that I did it, thinking I was helping you." Sarah remained silent, holding Michael in her arms. "Seeing you here today, witnessing the success you've built with your own hands, made me realize how wrong I was. You didn't need my help. You never did. You needed me to trust you, to respect your independence, your intelligence, your capability." David ran his hand through his hair. "I wanted so much to protect you that I ended up suffocating you." "Why are you here today, David?" Sarah finally asked. "Because—" He hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "Because not a day has gone by in the last 3 months that I haven't thought about you both. Because I wake up every morning missing your laughter, the plans you made for the future, the way Lily told stories to Michael." His voice faltered slightly. "Because I truly fell in love with you, Sarah. Not with the idea of saving you, not with the feeling of being the hero. I fell in love with the strong, intelligent, determined woman that you are." Sarah felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but she fought to keep them under control. "David, you hurt me deeply. The trust I had in you." "I know, and I know it may never come back, but—" He stepped closer. "Would you give me a chance to earn that trust back? A chance to prove that I've learned from my mistakes?" Michael began to whimper, and Sarah gently rocked him, using the movement as an excuse not to look directly at David. "I don't know if I can," she said honestly. "I don't know if I can trust again." "I understand, and I won't pressure you. But Sarah, what you've built here today is incredible. Your talent is real. Your potential is immense. And if you want, if you let me, I would like to be here to see where you go." "Like what? As an investor? As a boss?" "As a man in love with an extraordinary woman, as someone who wants to be part of your life, not as a savior or benefactor, but as—" A partner. The word hung between them, laden with possibilities and fears. Sarah looked at Lily playing in the playground, at Michael, who was starting to smile at David, at the empty boxes that represented her first true business success. "David," she finally said, "if you really want to be part of our lives, it has to be on our terms. No lies, no manipulation, no trying to protect me from my own choices. I accept any conditions. And you have to understand that I won't give up my dreams for you, that I will build my business. I will become financially independent. I will prove that I can succeed on my own. I wouldn't want it any other way." Sarah watched him for a long moment, searching for signs of insincerity or condescension. All she saw was sincerity, hope, and something that looked a lot like true love. "All right," she said, almost in a whisper. You can try." The smile that lit up David's face was like the sun rising after a long night. But Sarah raised her hand, interrupting any movement he might make toward her. "Slowly, David. Very slowly. First, I need to learn to trust you again. Then we'll see." "Slowly," he agreed. "In your time." When Lily came running back to them, she found the two of them organizing things in a silence that was no longer tense but filled with possibilities. And for the first time in months, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a future where love and independence could coexist. What she still didn't know was that the obstacles to that future were just beginning to appear. Sarah's resounding success at the summer festival marked the beginning of a new phase in her business life. In the following 2 weeks, she received 15 orders from different companies, all coming through referrals from clients who met her at the fair. Her small apartment transformed into a makeshift kitchen, with stacked pots, ingredients stored in every available corner, and the constant aroma of spices and homemade food. Lily had become her official assistant, helping to pack the meal prep in disposable containers and sticking labels with the Home Flavors logo that Sarah had hand-drawn. Michael watched everything from his baby seat, like a little supervisor approving the growing activity around him. David kept his word about respecting Sarah's pace. His visits resumed on Saturdays, but now with a different tone. He would arrive bringing ingredients that Sarah mentioned needing, always with a casual excuse about having stopped by the store and remembered, and would help organize the production for the following week. He was helpful without being intrusive, supportive without being condescending. "Have you thought about officially registering the business?" David asked one Saturday afternoon, while helping Lily stick labels on the meal prep for the next day. "I thought about it, but it's complicated. There's a lot of bureaucracy, costs." Sarah stirred a vegetable sauté that would be the base for 10 vegetarian meals ordered by an office in Midtown. "It's not that complicated, and as a sole proprietorship, the costs are quite low. Do you understand this?" "A little. I can help you with the paperwork if you want. No strings attached, just as a friend." The word "friend" still sounded strange between them. Loaded with unresolved feelings, Sarah appreciated the effort David made not to pressure for more intimacy. "Maybe," she said, tasting the seasoning of the sauté. "Let me think." It was exactly this growing caution of Sarah, combined with the visible success of her business, that was making others extremely uncomfortable. In Victoria Sanders' penthouse apartment, located in the Upper East Side, a very different meeting was taking place that same Saturday afternoon. Victoria, elegant as always, in a beige linen suit that cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, was serving French champagne to 2 special guests, Robert Johnson and a woman Sarah would never imagine was conspiring against her. "I must admit, Victoria, that you are being much smarter than I expected," Robert said, accepting the crystal glass. "Hiring a private investigator to track David's movements was brilliant. "We need to know the enemy to defeat them," Victoria replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And Sarah Johnson is becoming a greater threat than we imagined." The third person present in the meeting nodded gravely. Sandra Adams, 52 years old, owned a small chain of fast casual restaurants in downtown New York, specializing in Brazilian food for the executive crowd. For the past 15 years, she had built a solid business catering exactly to the market niche that Sarah was beginning to explore. "She's gaining clients who could be mine," Sandra explained, her voice carrying barely concealed bitterness. "2 companies have already cancelled contracts with me to hire this amateur." "See?" Victoria addressed Robert. "It's not just a personal matter. This woman is harming legitimate businesses with her unfair competition." "Unfair competition?" Robert raised an eyebrow. "She cooks at home, without a health permit, without invoices, without paying proper taxes." Sandra listed the accusations. "It's unfair competition with those who operate within the law." Victoria opened a folder containing photographs and documents that her investigator had collected. "Look at this. Sarah Johnson, single mother of 2, former homeless shelter resident with a history of jobs only as a cleaner. And suddenly, she becomes a successful entrepreneur? It's obvious she's receiving undeclared financial help." Robert studied the photos, which showed Sarah working in her makeshift kitchen, David helping with deliveries, and the 2 chatting amiably during a Saturday afternoon. "What do you propose?" "Simple," Victoria smiled coldly. "An anonymous report to the Health Department and the IRS. If she is operating illegally, she will be shut down. If David is financing her irregularly, he will be investigated. Either way, this romance will come to an end quickly." Sandra opened her own folder. "I know inspectors in both agencies. I can ensure that the report is taken very seriously." "And I," Victoria added, "can ensure that David understands the consequences of continuing this harmful association." Robert finished his champagne in silence, considering the proposal. "It's risky. If David finds out we're behind this—" "He won't find out," Victoria said confidently. "And when her house of cards collapses, he will realize that I was right all along, that people like Sarah Johnson only bring trouble to people like us." "Very well," Robert decided. "Do what you think is necessary. But be discreet." What none of them imagined was that Sarah Johnson had spent the last few months not only developing recipes, but also learning about her rights and obligations as an entrepreneur, and that her determination to do everything the right way would be exactly what saved her from the conspiracy being plotted against her. The following Monday, Sarah was finalizing a special order, 100 gourmet chocolate truffles for a board meeting, when there was a knock at the door. It was 9 in the morning, and she wasn't expecting anyone. Lily was at daycare, Michael was sleeping in the crib, and David only came by on Saturdays. "Ms. Sarah Johnson." The man at the door wore an official uniform and carried a clipboard. Beside him, a woman in a white coat held a tablet. "Yes, that's me. We are from the Municipal Health Department. We received a report about irregular business activity at this address." Sarah's heart raced, but she kept calm. "May I see your identification?" After verifying their credentials, she let them in. "May I ask what the report was about?" "Production of food without a health permit, sale of perishable goods without registration," the woman listed, looking around the kitchen. "Do you have a permit to operate?" "I do," Sarah replied calmly, heading to an organized folder she kept in a drawer. "I have been registered as a sole proprietorship for 3 weeks in the food preparation for delivery category. Here is my tax ID, the simplified license, and the certificate from the food handling course I took last week." The 2 inspectors exchanged surprised glances. Do you have control of the origin of the ingredients? I do. Sarah showed a handwritten spreadsheet where she recorded all purchases. All invoices are here, organized by date. And temperature control. Cooking thermometer, I always check before packing. Sarah showed the device. And all deliveries are made in proper thermal boxes. The inspection lasted 2 hours, and Sarah answered every question with the appropriate documentation. She had spent weeks studying the legal requirements, determined to do everything correctly from the start. "Miss Johnson," the inspector finally said, "I must admit that we rarely see micro-entrepreneurs so well organized. Everything is in accordance with the law." "Thank you. May I ask who made the report?" "It was anonymous, but it happens a lot with businesses that start to succeed. Competition, you know how it is." After the inspectors left, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, trembling from delayed nerves. She had passed the test, but the experience left her shaken. Someone wanted to harm her, and she had a suspicion of who it could be. When David arrived the following Saturday, he found Sarah more tense than usual. "Is something wrong?" he asked, noticing how she was automatically stirring the ingredients of a sauté without paying attention to what she was doing. Sarah told him about the visit from the health department, carefully observing his reaction. David's reaction. "Did you know anything about this?" "Me? Of course not. Sarah, why would I do that?" David looked genuinely shocked. "Did someone report you on purpose?" "It seems that way. But did you pass the inspection?" "I did. Luckily, or out of paranoia, I had done everything right from the start." David fell silent for a moment, processing the information. "Sarah, do you think it could have been someone close to me?" The direct question caught her off guard. "Why do you ask that?" "Because my dad has been insistent about me sorting out my personal life. And Victoria has been showing up frequently at family events." David hesitated. "They know about you, about us. And they pressure you to end this. Constantly." Sarah stopped stirring the sauté and looked him directly in the eye. "David, are you going to end this?" The question carried the weight of the last few months. The lies, the reconciliations, the uncertainties about the future. David stepped closer to her, stopping at a respectful distance but maintaining eye contact. "No," he said simply. "I'm not going to end it. I'm not going to give up on you, on us, on your kids." His voice gained firmness. "Sarah, I'm tired of letting other people decide my life. I'm tired of being the obedient son who does what's expected of him, even if it means losing your inheritance, even if it means losing everything, because I've realized that none of this is worth anything if I can't share it with you." Sarah felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but this time they weren't tears of sadness or frustration. They were tears of relief, of hope, of a happiness she had tried not to feel for fear of being disappointed again. "David, Sarah, I love you. I love your strength, your intelligence, your determination. I love the dedicated mother you are, the brave entrepreneur you've become, the principled woman who never gave up her values." He took another step toward her. "And if you let me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve to be part of yours." The kiss that followed was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. It wasn't just passion or desire, it was recognition, acceptance, the promise of a future built on solid foundations of mutual respect and true love. When they pulled apart, Sarah rested her forehead against his, breathing in the masculine scent she had missed without admitting it. "If we're going to do this," she said softly, "let's do it right. No lies, no secrets, no trying to protect each other from ourselves." "Agreed. And I'm not going to give up my business. I'm not going to be the rich wife who gives up everything to live for appearances. I wouldn't want you to. And your parents, your family, your whole social world? David smiled, the genuine smile she had learned to love. They're going to have to get used to it, because you are now part of my life, and I'm not letting go of that. In their arms, they heard Lily coming home from daycare, humming a song she had learned. When the girl entered the kitchen and saw them hugging, her face lit up. "Is Uncle David going to have dinner with us again?" Sarah looked at David, who nodded, with shining eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. And this time," Sarah smiled, "he's going to stay." What neither of them imagined was that on the other side of the city, Victoria Sanders was receiving a phone call that would completely change her strategies. "What do you mean she passed the inspection?" Victoria shouted into the phone. "You said it would be easy." "The woman is more prepared than we expected," Sandra replied from the other end, "but I still have an ace up my sleeve. I'll need more money, but I can guarantee that this time she won't get away." Victoria looked at the check she had written to Sandra the week before, $10,000 for operational expenses, and sighed. "How much?" $50,000. To ensure that the problem is resolved once and for all. $50,000? To get rid of a cleaner? To get rid of a threat to the future of the Johnsons. David is getting more involved with her. If we don't act now, it may be too late. Victoria closed her eyes, calculating the possibilities. $50,000 was a lot of money, but losing David to a woman like Sarah would be a humiliation she couldn't bear. "Fine, but this time ensure results. You can count on me." What Victoria didn't know was that her war against Sarah was about to take on a dimension that would put everyone in danger, and that true love sometimes needs to fight battles that go far beyond what one can imagine. December brought with it the scorching heat of New York summer and a complete transformation in Sarah's life. Her business had grown exponentially. She was now regularly serving 15 companies, had hired 2 helpers from the community, both single mothers she had met in the entrepreneurship course, and was negotiating the lease of a commercial kitchen on the ground floor of a building in the West Side. Home Flavors was no longer just a dream or a survival project. It was a real, registered, thriving business that employed other women and offered a healthy and tasty alternative for workers tired of industrialized food. Sarah had become a respected small business owner, invited to speak at events about female entrepreneurship and cited as an example of overcoming in newspaper articles. David had kept his promise to respect her independence, but he also became a constant and welcome presence in their lives. He spent Sunday afternoons in the commercial kitchen that Sarah had rented, helping to prepare the week's meal prep, while Lily played in the small makeshift office, and Michael watched everything from his high chair, already trying to grab the colorful toys hanging above him. Their relationship had solidified naturally, without haste, built on honest conversations, shared laughter, and a mutual admiration that grew each day. David had learned. Sarah had learned to value her strength without trying to protect her unnecessarily, and she had learned to trust his feelings without fear of losing her identity. But not everything was perfect in the garden. The pressure on David had intensified in recent weeks. Robert Johnson had become more direct in his threats, and Victoria Sanders more aggressive in her advances. Family dinners turned into battlefields where David defended his choices while facing veiled criticisms about social responsibility and relationship suitability. It was during one of those dinners, on a Tuesday night in December, that everything came to a head explosively. "David, you need to understand that your romantic adventures are affecting our reputation in business circles," Robert said, methodically cutting a filet mignon. At the upscale restaurant on Fifth Avenue where they had met. "Romantic adventures?" David dropped his cutlery. "Is that what you call love? I call it irresponsibility." You are 32 years old, David. You are the heir to an empire. Your wife will be the mother of the future heirs of the Johnsons. Do you really think a cleaner with 2 illegitimate children is suitable for that position? The word illegitimate hit David like a slap. He stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "Don't talk about my children like that." "Your children," Robert laughed coldly. "David, you have completely lost your mind." "No, Dad. I have finally found my mind. Lily and Michael are my children in my heart, just as Sarah is the woman I have chosen to share my life with." "Then choose." Robert's voice was icy. "Her or family? Love or inheritance? This romantic fantasy or your real future?" David looked at his father for a long moment, seeing for the first time not the powerful man he had always admired, but someone limited by prejudice and unable to understand that a person's true worth is not measured by their bank account. "I choose her," David said simply. "I choose love." "Then you are no longer my son, and you will have nothing that belongs to the Johnsons." "That's fine." David took his wallet, left money on the table to pay his share of the bill, and headed for the exit. "But Dad, you are the one losing. You are losing the chance to meet the most extraordinary woman in the world and 2 children who could have brought joy to your bitter life." Robert remained seated, watching his son leave the restaurant, unaware that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Sarah was facing her own battle. Sandra Adams had intensified her sabotage tactics in recent weeks. Not satisfied with the failure of the complaint to the health department, she had resorted to more direct attacks, calling Sarah's clients and inventing stories about food contamination, spreading rumors about tax irregularities, and even trying to bribe Sarah's helpers to sabotage production. On that same Tuesday, Sarah was in the commercial kitchen preparing a special order, 200 chicken croquettes for a corporate event, when she received a phone call that would change everything. "Sarah Johnson, this is John Carter from the Federation of Industries. We would like to invite you to participate in the Entrepreneur of the Year award." Sarah almost dropped the pot she was holding. "How?" "Your company has been nominated in the Social Micro-Enterprise of the Year category. The award is tomorrow night at the Ritz-Carlton. It's a very prestigious event, with the presence of important business people from all over the state." After hanging up the phone, Sarah stood still in the middle of the kitchen, trying to process the information. In 10 months, she had gone from an unemployed cleaner to an entrepreneur, nominated for a state award. It was almost unbelievable. "Boss, are you okay?" asked Mrs. Thompson, one of her helpers, noticing her astonished expression. "I'm great, Mrs. Thompson. In fact, we are great. We've been nominated for an award." The night of the event arrived faster than Sarah expected. She had bought a simple yet elegant dress from a store in Brooklyn, navy blue, 3/4 sleeves, which nicely concealed her still recovering postpartum body. David would accompany her, despite her protests about him not needing to face more problems because of her. "Sarah," he had said, holding her hands, "I want to be by your side in your moment of victory, no matter what happens." The Ritz-Carlton was stunning that night, with its main ballroom decorated in golden tones and huge floral arrangements. Business people in tuxedos circulated with champagne flutes in an atmosphere of luxury that Sarah had never experienced. "You look beautiful," David whispered in her ear as they entered the ballroom. "And you're going to shine." Sarah smiled nervously, adjusting the small purse she had borrowed from a neighbor. "I can't believe I'm here." "Believe it. You deserve to be here." The ceremony proceeded with the typical solemnity of corporate events. Several categories were awarded before Sarah's, and she felt her nervousness grow with each announcement. When her category finally arrived, her heart raced. "And the Social Micro-Enterprise of the Year award goes to..." The presenter opened the golden envelope. Sarah Johnson from Home Flavors. The ballroom erupted in applause, and Sarah felt her legs tremble. David helped her stand, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "I love you," before she walked toward the stage. On stage, receiving the crystal trophy from the hands of the state governor, Sarah looked out at the audience and saw smiling faces, people clapping, flashes from cameras. But her gaze searched for and found David, who watched her with a look of pride that made her feel as if she could conquer the world. "When I started this business," Sarah said into the microphone, her voice initially trembling but gaining strength, "I just wanted to give my children a better life. I never imagined I would make it this far. But I learned that when you work with honesty, dedication, and a lot of love, success is a natural consequence." She paused, looking back at David. "I also learned that true love does not diminish our dreams. He amplifies them. Thank you to everyone who believed in me, especially when I doubted myself." The applause was deafening, and when Sarah stepped off the stage, she was greeted by dozens of business people eager to hear her story and learn about her company. Business cards were exchanged, partnerships were suggested, and expansion opportunities were discussed. But the most important moment of the night happened when they were leaving the hotel. "Sarah," David stopped at the entrance, holding her hands, "I have something to tell you. Now. Now." He took a deep breath. "Today my father gave me an ultimatum. He said I had to choose between you and the family inheritance." Sarah's heart sank. "And you chose the inheritance." "No," David smiled. "I chose you. I chose us. I chose love." Before Sarah could respond, he knelt right there on the sidewalk in front of the hotel, under the yellow light of the street lamps and the curious gaze of passers-by. "Sarah Johnson, you taught me that true value is not in what we inherit, but in what we build. You showed me that real love is based on respect, admiration, and partnership." He pulled a small box from his tailored suit pocket. "Will you build a life with me? Will you marry me?" Sarah looked at the simple yet beautiful ring, a delicate solitaire reflecting the streetlight, and then at the man kneeling before her. The man who had chosen her above all else, who had learned to love her without trying to change her, who had become the father of her children in his heart. "Yes," she said, tears finally escaping. "Yes, I accept." The kiss that followed was witnessed by a few curious onlookers and applauded by a couple passing by. When they separated, David slipped the ring onto her finger and embraced her as if he would never let her go. "I love you, future Mrs. Johnson." "I love you, Mr. Johnson," she corrected, laughing, "because we are going to be a modern family where all names matter." 6 months later, in a small ceremony held in the garden of the new headquarters of Home Flavors, now occupying a beautiful old house in the West Side, Sarah Johnson married David Johnson. Lily was the proudest maid of honor in the world. Michael slept peacefully in the arms of his paternal grandmother, who had shown up unannounced. Robert Johnson had swallowed his pride a week before the wedding after meeting his grandchildren and realizing he had been very, very wrong. And John Carter, the entrepreneurship course teacher, officiated the ceremony. Victoria Sanders did not attend, of course. She had moved to Miami shortly after the engagement was announced in the newspapers, claiming business opportunities abroad. Sandra Adams had closed 2 of her restaurants after losing several clients to other businesses, offering the same type of homemade food that Sarah had popularized. During the party, while watching Sarah dance with David under the summer festival lights that she had insisted on keeping as decoration, Robert Johnson approached John Carter. "Professor, may I ask you a question?" "Of course, Mr. Johnson." "How did you know my daughter-in-law had the potential to go so far?" John Carter smiled, watching Sarah teach Lily to dance. It's simple, Mr. Johnson. Sometimes the most valuable diamond is the one covered in dirt. It just takes someone with the wisdom to clean it and let it shine. And my son had that wisdom? Your son had something better than wisdom, Mr. Johnson. He had love, and true love always recognizes real value. When the party ended and the guests left, David and Sarah found themselves alone in the garden, cleaning up the remnants of the celebration, while Lily slept in a chair and Michael rested in his stroller. "Do you regret it?" Sarah asked, gathering disposable cups. "Regret marrying the most amazing woman in the world? Never." David pulled her into his arms. "And you? Regret falling in love with a man who agreed to become a co-founder of his wife's company? Not in a million years." They laughed, kissed under the starry sky of New York and walked home, the home they had bought, together with the money they had both earned, in a true partnership of love and work. A year and a half after their first meeting at the bread shop, Sarah Johnson Johnson was the mother of 3 children. The third, a girl named Hope, had been born the previous year. Owner of a company that employed 15 people and served over 100 corporate clients, and wife to a man who loved her just as she was. David Johnson had discovered that giving up a material inheritance to gain an emotional inheritance had been the best deal of his life. And every morning, when they passed by the bread shop, now one of the official bread suppliers for Home Flavors, Mrs. Thompson greeted them with a proud smile and murmured to anyone who would listen, "I always knew those two were meant for each other. True love can be recognized from afar." Please like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and if you watched this far, comment, "I watched this far," and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's going to be very emotional.